I got hired in hell. Today was my first day on the job. Part 2. It was silent in the apartment, other than the thunderous roll of water boiling in the kettle. Derek waited for it to click off, then poured water into 2 mugs on the counter. "I believe you," he said, "for the record." He discarded the tea bags into the bin and poured milk into the tea. "You don't have to," I said. "I know it's crazy." I hugged the blanket I had taken from the couch tight around my shoulders. I was too shaken to change out of my damp clothes. The only heat I was getting was from the blanket, the old radiator, and the steam from the mug of tea Derek placed in front of me. "You don't have to believe me," I reiterated. "I know you probably don't even believe in hell, much less that they'd be recruiting in Cork." I took a gulp of tea and burnt the roof of my mouth. My eyes welled with tears. Derek looked unfazed. His skin looked sallow under his eyes now that the tears had dried. He stared into his mug of tea. "No, I do believe you. I don't know if I believe in hell, really, or heaven. I just never thought about it. But I do believe in strange things. Things we can't really see and don't want to see. I know you believe in that too. And what happened tonight was strange, but I think it's real." I gulped. My hands felt clammy around the mug. Derek had seen the woman pull me over the guardrail into the river. For him, it seemed as if I had disappeared for a few minutes. But to me, I had been ferried down the river and given a job interview for a position in hell only to be returned to the very spot I disappeared from. I wanted to grapple with how inexplicable this was, but we had both experienced this breach in the limits of reason, of time, of realms, and of reality. It seemed easier to accept that the reality we had lived in the past 29 years had just been shattered. "When I was at, the interview," I said quietly, "he seemed to know everything about me. He knew my name, he knew that, I don't know if you know this actually, that I still speak with my Nan even though she's dead." Derek nodded. "I know," he said. "I heard you talking in your room a couple of times after she died. It genuinely sounded like someone else was there." He locked eyes with me now, looking up from the reflection in his mug. His jaw was set. "That's why I know this is real," he said. "I know you see things that other people don't. If there's a hell, or some magical place, it would make sense that they would want you on their team. You see everything." I nodded, taking another sip of my tea. I wondered what it meant that hell wanted me. Did it mean I was evil? Bad and unfeeling enough to work for the archetype of an evil place? Just then, our housemate Lily came into the kitchen. She spent most of her day smoking fags and herbal cigarettes out of the window, only coming down to make pasta at odd hours. She was dressed, as always, in a purple satin nightgown that clung to her stomach and slipped down her arms like she was about to do a striptease. Her hair was piled up in a disheveled bun. "Whoa," she said. "You okay? You look shook up." "I'm grand," I lied, clenching my lips together in a forced smile. "Just got caught in the rain, that's all." Derek helped me peel off my damp clothes and get into the shower. I savored the 3 minutes of hot water, feeling it trickle down my back and legs, droplets collecting on the fine hairs of my arms that were crossed firmly across my stomach. My mind whirled when I got into bed and Derek turned the lights off. Cloaked in darkness, my stomach filled with dread at the idea of meeting Melvin again under the flashing street lamp. My head was filled with plans to get out of the situation, my thoughts flipping one after the other like a Rolodex. As much as I was consumed by electric panic, I could not deny that a small corner of my brain was excited with the power I now wielded, whatever it may be. The next day, I woke up early and sat at the kitchen table, violently shaking over my cup of tea. My eyes refused to focus on anything. About an hour later, Derek stumbled in, pushing his fingers through his knotted, rumpled hair. "You all right?" he said groggily. I could not bring myself to answer him. "Ready for your big day?" he tried again, as if he was referring to Debs or a graduation. "I'm just not really sure what I've gotten myself into, to be honest, I whispered. Steam curled up from my cup of tea even though it had sat untouched for a good part of the last hour. You could always blow it off and come to that gig with me, Derek suggested. Oh shit, I said. I forgot that was tonight. I'm sorry. It's all right, he said, opening the fridge. I'm sure they'll be playing another time. 15 minutes before sunset that evening, we left the house. Derek was wearing his leather jacket that had been a staple during college but now hardly made an appearance. I had convinced him to go to the gig without me. Knowing that he was enjoying himself in some dimly lit venue would inevitably help me get through my first day on the job in hell. This time we made a beeline towards the street lamp in question. I could see it flickering from up the street now, cautiously illuminating the painted dragon on the front of the Japanese cafe across the road. As we approached, I saw Melvin underneath, wearing a tan canvas trench coat over another coordinating suit, this one made out of a deep, satiny burgundy material. When he saw us, he checked his watch. On time, I suppose, he said. His eyes flickered to me, then to Derek, then back to me. I don't suppose this mortal boy will be joining us this evening, he said gruffly. No, I said, turning to Derek. He gave me a bone-squeezing hug, and I clung back as if my life depended on it. I'll be at the gig, but I'll have my phone on me the whole time if you need to ring me, he whispered. I don't even know if I'll have service, but don't worry, I reassured him. His eyes were wide and worried, but in a strange way he seemed proud of me. Off you go, I said, giving his arm one last squeeze. He nodded at me, and then at Melvin, and sauntered off into the dusk. Melvin didn't say a word, just watched Derek recede down the street until he was satisfied that he was far enough away. Right, he said. Now we can get to work. He produced a thin, leather briefcase from behind him and set it down to unlatch it. Inside were a smattering of papers and bound reports. He handed me a shiny laminated manual with cheap plastic binding. The delivering process, a how-to guide for new recruits, it read. There's some light reading for you, he said. Now, our first soul should be arriving soon. I looked at him plainly, with the manual perched in my hands. What do you mean, soul? I asked. You'll see. They'll look normal to you, he said, fishing a carton of pre-rolled cigarettes from his coat pocket and lighting one. Shit, I nearly forgot, he exclaimed, bending down to fish something else out of the suitcase. His lit cigarette bobbed in his mouth, the illuminated tip bouncing around like a buoy in the dark sea. He pulled a piece of smooth, rounded wood out of his briefcase and handed it to me. It was a skull, or rather, a mask in the shape of a skull. It had 2 small eye holes and gray circular teeth attached to the bottom. It looked ancient and tribal. You have to wear this, he said. I stared at the primal-looking relic of death in my hands. Wait, I said. Am I like the Grim Reaper? Melvin looked at me with an air of disgust, flicking the ash off his cigarette. Don't be so conservative, he said. Plus I find scythes a little dated, don't you think? I strapped the mask around my face just as someone approached the street lamp. It was a younger man, maybe late 20s or early 30s, with a jagged haircut and a long, languid walk like he was drunk. All right, he greeted us as he stood under the sporadic light of the street lamp. How are things? Melvin gave him a once-over. Can I have a fag? The man asked, gesturing at Melvin's cigarette. No, Melvin said. Open your mouth. The man obeyed, revealing a mouthful of chipped and silver teeth, some missing. Check under his tongue, Melvin instructed me. I shivered and wiped my hands on my jeans. Can you lift your tongue, please? I asked him hesitantly, like I was a teenage dental hygienist. He lifted his pink tongue to reveal a flash of gold nestled in the crevice of his gummy soft palate. Pick it up, Melvin instructed. I reached into his mouth and pulled out a coin webbed with strings of saliva. This coin pays for his passage to the other side, Melvin said. Flip it over to see what's on it. I flipped it, getting mucusy spit on my fingers. On the other side, a 5-pointed star was engraved in a circle. "He has the pentacle etched into his coin, so he's going to heaven," Melvin said. "When there's no pentacle, that means they're ours to take to hell." I rubbed the coin between my fingers. It was smooth and striated. I could see the diffused reflection of the flickering street lamp in it. "The problem arises when a soul arrives to you without a coin," Melvin said in a slow, cautionary tone. "Sure, we've been having that problem a lot recently. It means they're not going to be taken, or conversely, the coin has been taken from them. When that happens, you may need to call on the family of the soul. We've had a good amount of low-life family members stealing coins from the dead and trying to pawn them off. That is not acceptable under any circumstances, for obvious reasons. It's up to you to retrieve the coin if it's been stolen." Melvin then made a long sweeping gesture into the river. It was then that I noticed the gondola, the boat Mary had forced me into the night before, was once again tethered to the stairs in the river. Its miniature Viking-esque mast bobbed up and down, looking at the current. "Shall we?" Melvin asked. The soul said nothing as we ferried him along the Indigo River, Melvin and I standing near the helm of the little boat, taking turns rowing. I was acutely aware of the skeleton mask adhered to my face. The wood was soft and worn, melded to my face like the calcified hand of an ancient god. Instead of heading to the shipping container that was his office, Melvin explained we were following the river all the way east to where it fed out to the sea. The dim moonlight, obscured by the thick fog of clouds, made the scenery blur together in a dreamlike montage. It was hard to make out anything definitively. I saw Blackrock Castle, its regal stones fused to the sky, driftwood washing up along the beaches, leaving ripples of sand, the glint of sea glass along the shore, much nearer and brighter to us than the shuttered churches and homes that lay cloistered inland. It was very clear that these earthly mirages of daily life were of another world laying far beyond our reach. I looked back at the soul to see if he was perceiving this as well, and if he was frightened by the realization that this city may never be real to him again. But he seemed peaceful. He looked at the passing scenery reflectively, his hands folded in his lap, oversized brown trousers rippling in the night winds. Whatever he was leaving behind in that ghost world that now lay behind the shore, it did not disturb him. "All right," Melvin said abruptly, handing me the oar. "You see that blue spot on the horizon?" I squinted through the eye-holes of my mask. An orb of light, like a star, reverberated at the edge of my vision. "Yeah," I said. "I see it." "Row us there. That's where we make the handoff." The oar split the water with ease. I rowed us forward towards the light, feeling giddy and powerful like a kid swimming belly down on a kickboard. We were gliding along in a river that was ambivalent to space and time. As the little cliffs and sandy banks of the Lee gave way to the ocean, the tide seemed to pull us outward with intensity. Melvin kept smoothing his jacket as we got closer and closer to the blue light, which now appeared flat and spread out like a bioluminescent pool. As we approached the edge of it, I noticed there was another boat in the middle. "All right, stop," Melvin said, holding his hand up to stop me. I stopped rowing and felt the boat give way to the buoyant waves of water. We bobbed side by side on the surface. Some distance away was the other boat, perfectly still. It was a gondola, the same shape as ours, but only one person stood in it. They were wearing a mask, not like mine, but square, almost like a welder's helmet with a silver strap wrapping around the eyes. Affixed to their back, something silver glinted in the moonlight, like branches. "I'll take it from here," Melvin said, motioning me to hand over the oar. The blue light shimmered below us, like it was being lit by a moon underneath the sea. As we approached, the figure in the other boat remained motionless. So did the soul. He did not seem frightened by this otherworldly masked figure any more than he had seemed frightened by me. "All right, we've got one for heaven," Melvin announced, a little too loudly. The masked figure didn't react as Melvin ushered the soul up and supported his shoulders as he stepped clumsily from one boat to the other. With the soul transferred, the masked figure raised his oar and dipped it into the water. Melvin looked decidedly at his watch. Right, cheers. We'll be seeing you later then, he said, not making eye contact with the silver band where the figure's eyes would be. Off we go, he whispered to me and sliced the water with the oar, reeling us backwards. Once we retreated from the glowing pool, I turned to Melvin. Who is that? I said through clenched teeth. Ah, yes, that's Heaven's messenger. Doesn't talk much. Think your job, but heaven. Like an angel? I asked. He turned around and shot me a concerned look mid-row. You're quite wed to those kinds of archetypes, aren't you? He said. I shrugged. It was getting cold now. When we docked beneath the street lamp, Melvin told me I should take the lead with the next soul. The mask was still securely tethered to my face. I could feel my cheekbones pressing against the wood of the skull. I stood there, fist balled so my nails dug into my palms, waiting for someone to arrive. I watched people crossing the bridge one by one, trying to discern if any of them were headed to meet me. It was like waiting for a bus to come around the corner. Which one of these people would be the one I ferried to the afterlife? Was there anything in their face that would give it away? Melvin said nothing as I stared through the mist rising from the river and settling around the low buildings. He stood under the light, chain-smoking cigarettes and flicking the glowing orange butts into the river where they fizzled out in a bubble of ash. I was watching him partake in this ritual of lighting, taking purposeful drags, and flicking when I felt someone approaching me. I looked away from the bridge and over to the cement stairs, the same set that I had traipsed down 2 days in a row to meet my colleagues from hell. There walked a boy with black hair, his cheekbones pushed out like he was biting the insides of his cheeks. He looked directly at me. He was no more than 16 or 17, though the dark made it difficult to tell. His black hair hung in jagged peaks around his face as he sauntered towards me. His eyes were watery, but they were dead set on me. He came to a stop under the flickering light. It cast long diagonal shadows down his body like scars. I looked to Melvin for reassurance, but he just nodded at me and flicked the ash from his cigarette. I balled my fists. "Open your mouth," I instructed the boy. My voice was quiet but firm. He obeyed. His canine teeth were pointed, front teeth rigid where the enamel had eroded away. "Lift your tongue." The gold coin was there, but it looked dull and green in the shadow. There was nothing engraved on it. I took it in my fingers, shutting my eyes as I flipped it. I longed to see the safety of the pentacle etched on the other side. I wished to see it so badly that I burned its image into my vision, hoping that I would manifest it when I opened my eyes. But when I looked, the other side was blank. I flipped it between my fingers again to make sure, but nothing. This boy was going to hell. The breeze off the river seemed to garner a new chill. I was grateful that I was wearing the mask, for if I was not, the boy surely would have seen my face drop and surely guessed his fate. "Get in the boat," I said firmly, pointing to the gondola drifting on the water. Melvin let me row the whole way, though my hands were unsteady and I kept unintentionally steering the boat from side to side. I tried not to glance back at the boy. He emitted an air of uneasiness that I could sense without looking at him. As we neared the mouth of the river, I turned to Melvin. "So where do we, hand off? Is it the same?" I asked, trying not to betray the boy's destination. "No," Melvin sniffed. "This is your job. You are the messenger. Row out to where we were before and stop. I'll tell you what to do." I obeyed him without another word. Briefly, it occurred to me that I may actually see hell. How does one prepare for that kind of thing? I nearly dropped the oar into the river, contemplating the esoteric realities of my new job. Soon we approached the blue nebulous waters where I had given over the previous soul to the angel. However, we were still the only boat as far as the eye could see. "Focus," Melvin said. "Very hard. Close your eyes." I looked back at the boy, which I instantly regretted. His Adam's apple was throbbing visibly, the only clue to his discomfort behind his stone expression. His face was twisted in determination, like he had been stabbed in battle and he was kneeling, clutching his insides, as he tried to die with honor. I clenched my eyes tight. Visions of Dante's Inferno burned behind my eyelids. I pictured the hell I was delivering this boy into, the gnashing of teeth, all flames and fire and blood and muscle being ripped from bone. I thought about what he must have done to deserve such a thing, what I must have done to deserve the devil as a colleague. I heard a sound like water rushing over a dam, though there was nothing of the sort around. I opened my eyes and saw a crack in the world, mere inches in front of our boat. A black line stretched across the mouth of the river, currents of water folded into its depths the way pages fold into the spine of an open book. The crack widened and widened, pushing us back and spilling water into the boat. It now resembled a waterfall on either side, mist rising up from an immense blackness. The boat rocked, and I looked to Melvin. My mouth was ajar, although you could not see through the mask. Melvin shrugged at my stupor. "This is it," he said. "This is where we drop him." I turned to the boy. His pride was gone, and now he looked at me in terror, his jet-black hair pasted to his face by the mist. He clutched the bottom of his shirt with both hands as he crumpled into the back of the boat. This can't be right," he said, shaking his head feverishly. "Sorry, boy," Melvin offered, a little too enthusiastically to be sincere. He extended his leg and motioned to the boy with the tip of his dress shoe. "Up you go," he said. The boy was crying now, his facade shattered, and he slowly raised himself from his knees, with his hands firmly grasping the side of the boat. He shifted his gaze to me. "Will it hurt?" he whimpered, glancing from my skull mask to the cavernous black depth before him. "I don't know," I said honestly. I looked at him a moment and then extended my hand to him. "You can take my hand, if it helps," I offered. He looked at me, then my hand intently. His sight hovered on my nails, which I had forgot I had painted pale pink earlier that week. My office job didn't appreciate us painting them bright colors. He grasped my hand. His grip was damp and cold, but firm with desperation. I planted one foot firmly on the front end of the boat, feeling it sway slightly beneath my weight. Melvin urged me to be careful. I envisioned the boat capsizing into the crater, the three of us tumbling down into the darkness for eternity. The boy shuffled to the front of the boat. We teetered precariously on the edge of abandon, the bow teasingly lapping at the darkness. "Are you ready?" I asked the boy. I gave his hand a maternal squeeze. He looked at me, then bit his lower lip and nodded. He put one foot out of the boat, feeling around on the air like he was trying to find the last step of a staircase in the dark. He let go of me and braced both of his hands on the side of the boat, slowly shifting his weight over. In one movement, he swung his whole body over, releasing his grasp, and plummeted into the abyss. He cut through the air like a knife, arms straight by his sides like he was doing a pencil dive. The air rippled his black hair as he fell down, descending and descending until he was just a blip of flesh in the darkness, and then nothing. It was like watching a rocket being launched into space, watching its tangibility slowly dissolve against a background of black infinite, until it is so impossibly small you struggle to remember how real it was when it was right in front of you. I braced myself to hear a thump of impact as the boy struck the bottom of the crevice. But it never came. I looked to Melvin, conscious that there were now tears welled in my eyes. "Well, we're done here," he said, peering down his nose into the abyss. "Might as well get going." He slapped my back, and my whole body reeled from the force. I picked up the oar and started rowing. We went most of the way back in silence, nothing but the gentle lapping of the Indigo River serenading us. It irritated me, and I decided I could not row in silence anymore. "What was so bad about him?" I asked, staring straight ahead. My mouth was so rigid it was hard to get the words out. "I beg your pardon?" Melvin asked from the back of the boat. "That boy. What was so bad about him that he had to go to hell?" "I don't know. I'm not a caseworker," Melvin said. I refused to face him, but I could hear his lips were wrapped around a cigarette. "He didn't seem bad. Seemed like a pure cruel thing we did to him there. He was scared." "Yeah, well, aren't we all?" he muttered. This time I turned to face him. "How do you think it's fair throwing children off a cliff like that?" I mean, couldn't we have at least... He killed a kid. I stared at Melvin as he puffed the cigarette. Billows of smoke came out either side of his mouth. What? I don't usually see the files, but I saw this one. Yep, he killed a kid, his foster brother. The poor lad was 5, and he was 10. Tortured him mercilessly until one day he threw a brick at him while they were playing. Hit him right here. Melvin pointed to the base of his skull with his thumb. Died instantly. He didn't regret it either. He looked up at me, locking my eyes. I was too engrossed to look away. Melvin continued. 3 months ago, he was up drinking with the boys. Fucked up on drink or whatever else he was taking. Started bragging about it. Said he should have won a medal for his aim. Said the kid was terrified whenever he saw him. Eyes got big as saucers. Said it was funnier because the kid's parents had been junkies. Used to rough him up, too. When he hit him, the kid just dropped. Parents had covered it up for him at the time, of course. He exhaled smoke from both nostrils. Dawn light danced off the water. Guess one of his friends was just as violent because he beat him to death a few weeks later. Serves him right if you ask me. I said nothing for the rest of the way. The currents shone in white stripes where the dusky light illuminated them. I sliced each one in half with my oar, appreciating how it engulfed them in shadow. How dare there be light left in this world? The rope bristled my palms as I knotted it and prepared to dock the boat under the flickering street lamp. As I looked up, I saw Mary standing under it. She had a hood pulled over her head and a box in her hands. Oh, Jesus, great, I thought to myself. Melvin ascended the staircase before I had docked the boat. Mary has a little surprise for you, he offered. The first days are always difficult. We thought this might help. I walked up to them, scrambling over the guardrail. Mary was smiling so intensely it looked like her face might crack. She opened the box to reveal a bird lying on a nest of straw. It was the pigeon I had rescued from the shopping center when I had encountered her. She stroked it, and its feathers slowly rustled, brimming with energy. Its eyes slowly peeled open, crests of feathers separating on its neck as it got up and looked around. It perched on the edge of the box, then flew up into the shadow of the street lamp, and up into the purple sky, drifting on the updraft of the river with its wings outstretched. It made it, I whispered to myself. See? Melvin said, patting my back more gently this time. It's not all bad. That's all for us tonight. I lifted the mask off my face and went to hand it to him, the gleaming wood of the skull flashing under the shorting streetlight. What are you doing? That's yours, he said. Besides, you're on your own tomorrow. But what if I have a question? His lips twisted into an uneven smile. Just ask me. I can still answer. Then he walked off, hands in the pockets of his trench coat, disappearing along the river. My skull mask hung limply in my hands. I looked at Mary. She was beaming at me. Good on you, she said. The first day's the toughest. You're strong stuff. Cheers, Mary, I said. I'll see you later. It was dark again. The clouds were inky against the sky. Unlike last night, Derek wasn't waiting for me this time. He was probably still at the gig, I reminded myself. No time had actually passed since I left him at the street lamp. I climbed the stairs onto the street and walked myself home in the company of the night. I let myself in and peeled off my jacket and shoes. My head was whirring, electrical and empty, like the way the wind whips around the plains before a storm. I went to make myself a cup of tea, but came to an abrupt stop when I saw Lily clattering around in the kitchen. She was wearing a gray dressing gown. The steam from a pot of boiling water was making her baby hairs curl and stick to her face. Hey, she said flatly. Hey, I said, tucking my mask behind my back so she couldn't see it. Something came for you in the post, she said. I put it on the table there. Looks like an invite or something. I looked down at the thin red envelope on the table. Cool, thanks, I said as I picked it up and retreated to my room. My cup of tea would have to wait. I shut the door behind me and flipped the envelope in my hands. There was no addresses written on it, just my name, Sarah Horgan, in gentle black slopes. The flap was sealed with dark red wax. It looked like blood. It opened cleanly. The envelope was so flat and thin it couldn't have held more than a sheet of paper. I reached inside and withdrew a 50 euro note. Upon fishing it out of the envelope, I realized it was in fact a stack of many 50 euro notes. They swelled in my hands. 50, 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000? How the hell had they fit in the envelope? I let the money fall to the bed. The mattress gently buckled as I sat, staring unfocused at my closet doors. The pink blouse I had picked out for work on Monday was hanging on the knobs, a reminder to iron it over the weekend. I got up and put it back in my closet, hanging my skull mask in its place. The empty eye sockets stared up at me, the white of the closet peeking through them. I won't be needing that pink work blouse anyway, I thought.